Harold Jenkins first saw Martha Williams on a rainy Tuesday in April 1965. He was standing in line at Miller's Bakery in downtown Portland, waiting to buy his usual coffee and donut before heading to work. The small bell above the door jingled, and in walked a woman with auburn hair and kind eyes. Harold couldn't help but notice how she smiled at everyone in the shop, including the grumpy old man who always complained about his bread being too hard. "Good morning," she said to Harold when it was her turn to order. "Looks like the rain isn't stopping anytime soon." Harold, normally shy around strangers, especially beautiful women, found himself easily chatting with her. "I'm Harold," he said, offering his hand. "Martha," she replied, her handshake firm and warm. That simple meeting changed everything for both of them. Harold, a 28-year-old accountant at Thompson & Sons, had lived a quiet, orderly life. His small apartment was neat, his clothes always ironed, and his days followed the same pattern. Martha, 26, taught third grade at Lincoln Elementary School. Her classroom was known for its colorful decorations and the way she made even the most difficult students feel special. After their bakery encounter, Harold started showing up at Miller's every morning, hoping to see Martha again. 3 days later, she returned. This time, Harold gathered his courage and asked if she would like to have dinner with him that weekend. "I thought you'd never ask," Martha said, her smile brightening the entire shop. Their first date was at Giovanni's Italian restaurant. Harold arrived 15 minutes early, nervously adjusting his tie in the reflection of the window. Martha wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes. They talked for hours, discovering they both loved mystery novels, classical music, and taking long walks in Forest Park. "I've never met anyone so easy to talk to," Harold told his friend Bill the next day. "It's like I've known her my whole life." By their fifth date, Harold knew Martha was special. She listened when he talked about his dreams of one day starting his own accounting firm. She didn't laugh when he admitted he collected stamps as a hobby. Instead, she showed genuine interest, asking questions about rare finds and special editions. What Harold found most impressive was Martha's dedication to her students. She often stayed late making special learning materials for children who struggled with reading. She used her own money to buy books for those who couldn't afford them. "Every child deserves a chance to love learning," she told Harold as they walked through the park one Sunday afternoon, fallen leaves crunching beneath their feet. 6 months after they met, on a clear October day, Harold knelt on one knee at the same bakery where they first met and asked Martha to be his wife. The entire shop erupted in applause when she said yes. They married in a simple ceremony in December. Martha wore her mother's wedding dress, slightly altered to fit her taller frame. Harold couldn't stop smiling as she walked down the aisle of the small church. 40 people watched as they exchanged vows, promises to love, honor, and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. Neither Harold nor Martha came from wealthy families, so they started their life together in a small rented apartment. Every evening, they would sit at their tiny kitchen table, planning their future while eating simple meals Martha prepared. "We don't need much," Martha often said, "just each other." What Harold didn't know then was that Martha was keeping a secret, one that would remain hidden for most of their lives together. By the summer of 1970, Harold and Martha had saved enough money to buy their first home. It was a modest 2-bedroom house with a small yard on Maple Street. The previous owners had neglected the garden, but Martha saw potential in the overgrown space. "We can plant roses here," she told Harold, pointing to a sunny spot near the fence, "and maybe a vegetable garden in the back." Harold wasn't much of a gardener, but he loved seeing Martha's excitement. On weekends, they worked together, pulling weeds and turning soil. Harold built a wooden bench under the big oak tree, where they often sat in the evenings, watching fireflies dance in the growing darkness. Their neighbors quickly grew fond of the Jenkins couple. Martha always remembered birthdays and anniversaries, baking her famous apple pies for special occasions. Harold helped the elderly Mr. Wilson with his taxes every April. They became an important part of their small community. Harold's career at Thompson & Sons was going well. His careful attention to detail and honest approach earned him a promotion to senior accountant. His boss, Mr. Thompson, often said, "Jenkins is the most reliable man I know." Martha continued teaching third grade, becoming known throughout the district for her creative methods. Children who struggled in other classes bloomed under her care. Parents requested her class for their children, knowing she would find unique ways to help them learn. "You have a gift," Harold told her one night as she decorated Valentine's Day cards for her students. "Those children are lucky to have you." Martha smiled. Harold noticed something flicker in her eyes, something like sadness or worry. It disappeared so quickly that he wondered if he had imagined it. In 1972, Harold and Martha faced their first major disappointment as a couple. After trying for 2 years to have a child, doctors told them Martha couldn't have children. The news hit them hard, especially Martha, who spent 3 days barely speaking, her eyes red from crying. "We still have each other," Harold said, holding her hand across their kitchen table. "And you have 30 children every year who adore you." Slowly, Martha emerged from her sadness. She threw herself into her teaching with even more passion. Harold suggested they could adopt, but Martha seemed hesitant. "Maybe someday," was all she would say. It was around this time that Martha mentioned her cousin in Chicago for the first time. "Elaine is sick," she told Harold one evening. "I should visit her. She doesn't have anyone else." Harold, always supportive, agreed immediately. "Of course you should go. How long will you be away?" "Just a week," Martha said, already packing a small suitcase. She lives alone in an apartment downtown. When Martha returned from that first trip, Harold noticed she seemed different. Quieter. Sometimes he would find her staring out the window, lost in thought. When he asked if everything was okay, she would smile and say, "Just tired from the journey." After a few days, the old Martha returned, cheerful, loving, and focused on their life together. As the years passed, Harold and Martha settled into a comfortable routine. Every Sunday, they drove to church in their blue Chevrolet. They hosted small dinner parties for friends and colleagues. During summer breaks, they took short trips to the coast, collecting shells and building sandcastles like children. Their life wasn't exciting by most standards, but it was filled with small joys and deep contentment. Harold often looked at Martha across a room while she was reading, cooking, or talking to friends, and felt amazed that this wonderful woman had chosen to share her life with him. Every few years, Martha would visit her cousin Elaine in Chicago. Each time, she returned with the same quiet mood that eventually faded. Harold never questioned these changes, believing everyone needed private thoughts and feelings. What he didn't know was that these trips held the key to Martha's secret, a truth that would remain hidden for decades to come. The first unusual trip to Chicago happened in 1975. Martha received a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon, and Harold noticed how her face changed when she heard the voice on the other end. She turned away from him, speaking quietly, her shoulders tense. "I need to visit Elaine again," she told Harold that evening. "It's urgent." "Is everything okay?" Harold asked, concerned by the worry lines around her eyes. "Yes, just some family matters," Martha said, not meeting his gaze. "I'll only be gone for 4 days." Harold drove her to the airport early the next morning. As they said goodbye, Martha hugged him tighter than usual. "I love you," she whispered. "Never forget that." When she returned, Martha brought a small wooden music box for Harold, a gift from Chicago. She said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. For nearly a week after her return, Martha seemed different. She jumped at sudden noises. She checked the locks on the doors and windows twice before bed. She watched people carefully when they walked around the neighborhood. Harold noticed these changes but didn't press for explanations. He believed in giving people space when they needed it. Eventually, Martha returned to her normal self, and life continued as before. Over the next 20 years, Martha made similar trips to Chicago every few years. Sometimes she mentioned Elaine was sick. Other times she said she needed to help with family business. Each time, she returned with a small gift for Harold, a tie clip, a book, a special kind of candy only found in Chicago. And each time, she went through the same period of watchfulness and worry before settling back into their routine. By 1995, Harold had started his own small accounting firm. It wasn't large, but it had a solid reputation in Portland. Martha had been named Teacher of the Year twice and was respected throughout the school district. They had created a good life together, even without children. One evening, as they sat in their living room listening to jazz records, Harold asked, "How is Elaine doing? You haven't mentioned visiting her lately." Martha's hand froze around her teacup. "She's fine. Getting older, like all of us. You know, In all these years, I've never met her, Harold said. Maybe next time we could both go to Chicago. Martha set down her cup carefully. Elaine is very private. She doesn't like meeting new people. After a pause, she added, besides, I use those trips as my little getaways. Every marriage needs a little space sometimes, don't you think? Harold nodded, though something in Martha's tone made him curious. In 30 years of marriage, he had never seen a single photo of Elaine. Martha never received letters or calls from her, except right before these mysterious trips. One day, Harold was cleaning the attic when he found a locked wooden box pushed far back under the eaves. He mentioned it to Martha at dinner. "Oh, that's just some old papers and keepsakes," she said quickly. "Nothing important." Harold noticed how her hands trembled slightly as she served the roast chicken. "Would you like me to move it somewhere more accessible?" "No," Martha said sharply, then softened her tone. "No, thank you. It's fine where it is." That night, Harold heard Martha go up to the attic. He lay in bed, listening to her footsteps above, wondering what was in the box that seemed so important. But he didn't ask. In their marriage, trust had always been more important than curiosity. The trips to Chicago became less frequent as they entered their 60s. Martha's last visit was in 2010, when she was 71. She returned looking tired but somehow relieved. "Elaine is doing well," she told Harold, though he hadn't asked. "I don't think I'll need to visit again anytime soon." Harold nodded and welcomed his wife home with her favorite dinner. Whatever secrets Martha kept, he trusted they weren't important enough to change what they had built together over 45 years of marriage. He had no idea how wrong he was. In the autumn of 2020, Harold and Martha celebrated their 55th wedding anniversary. Despite the pandemic restrictions, they managed a small celebration in their backyard. Their closest friends stood at a safe distance, raising glasses of champagne to toast the couple's long marriage. "To Harold and Martha," said Bill, Harold's oldest friend. "You two are what the rest of us aim for." Martha smiled and squeezed Harold's hand. At 81 and 83, they had grown old gracefully together. Martha's auburn hair had turned completely white, and Harold walked with a cane due to his bad knee, but their love remained strong. 2 months after their anniversary, Harold began feeling unusually tired. At first, he blamed it on age and the colder weather. But when he struggled to climb the stairs to their bedroom, Martha insisted he see a doctor. "It's probably nothing," Harold said as Martha helped him put on his coat for the appointment. "Just an old man running out of steam." The doctor's office called 3 days later with concerning test results. Harold needed to go to Portland General Hospital for more tests immediately. Within a week, the diagnosis came: advanced pancreatic cancer that had already spread to his liver. "How long?" Harold asked the oncologist, his voice steady while Martha silently wept beside him. "Without treatment, a few months at most," the doctor said gently. "With aggressive treatment, perhaps a year, but the quality of life would be compromised." Harold looked at Martha, then back at the doctor. "I've had a good run. I'd rather have a few good months than a painful year." Martha didn't argue. She knew Harold well enough to respect his decision. 3 weeks later, Harold's condition worsened suddenly, and he was admitted to the hospital. Martha sat by his bed day and night, reading to him or simply holding his hand while he slept. The nurses came to know her well, bringing her coffee and making sure she ate something each day. On the 4th day of Harold's hospital stay, a new nurse entered the room. She was older, perhaps in her 60s, with short gray hair and kind eyes behind thick glasses. She checked Harold's vital signs and adjusted his IV. "Martha," the nurse said suddenly, her head tilted in recognition. "Martha Williams." "No, that can't be right." Martha looked up, her face pale. "I'm Martha Jenkins," she said quietly. "Harold's wife." The nurse shook her head, confused. "I'm sorry. You look exactly like someone I knew in nursing school in Chicago. Margaret Wilson was her name. We trained together at Cook County Hospital in the early 60s. Harold, who had been doozing, opened his eyes. "What's that about Chicago?" "Nothing, dear," Martha said quickly. "The nurse has confused me with someone else." The nurse apologized and left, but the damage was done. Harold's mind, though weakened by illness and medication, held on to this strange interaction. "You've never mentioned nursing school," he said later that evening when they were alone. "Because I never went to nursing school," Martha replied, her voice tight. That nurse was confused. Harold might have let it go if not for what happened the next day. While Martha was speaking with the doctor in the hallway, a hospital administrator came to check on insurance details. "Mr. Jenkins, we seem to have a discrepancy in your wife's social security number," the administrator said, looking at his tablet. "The number she provided doesn't match our records from her previous visit." "My wife has only been a patient here once for her gallbladder surgery in 2012, Harold said. The administrator frowned. "Our records show a Margaret Wilson with the same birth date as your wife was treated here in 1985. The photos in our system are similar, but the social security numbers are different." When Martha returned, Harold watched her carefully. 55 years of marriage had taught him to read her expressions. He saw fear in her eyes when he mentioned the administrator's visit. "There must be a mistake in their records," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Hospitals mix up patients all the time." That night, as Martha slept uncomfortably in the chair beside his bed, Harold lay awake. For the first time in their long marriage, he wondered if he truly knew the woman he had loved for over 5 decades. The following morning, Harold watched Martha as she arranged flowers sent by their neighbors. Her hands moved with purpose, but her eyes kept darting to the door whenever someone walked past. He had never seen her so nervous. "Martha," Harold said softly, "I think we need to talk." Martha set down the vase and turned to him. For a moment, she looked like she might deny anything was wrong, but then her shoulders dropped. "Yes," she whispered. "I suppose we do." Harold reached for the bed control and raised himself to a sitting position. "Who is Margaret Wilson?" Martha closed the door to the hospital room and pulled her chair close to Harold's bed. Her hands trembled as she took a deep breath. "I was born Margaret Wilson in 1939 in a small town outside Chicago," she began, her voice barely audible. "Not Martha Williams from Seattle." Harold felt his heart pound against his chest. The woman sitting beside him, the woman he had shared his life with for 55 years, was a stranger. "I don't understand," he said. "Why would you lie about your name, your hometown?" Martha, or Margaret, looked down at her wedding ring, twisting it around her finger. "Because I was running away." She explained that at 23, she had married a man named Robert Carlson. At first, he was charming and loving, but soon after their wedding, he changed. He controlled what she wore, who she talked to, and where she went. When she didn't follow his rules, he hurt her. "The first time he hit me, I told myself it was a mistake," Martha said, her voice steadier now. "By the third time, I knew it would never stop." Harold reached for her hand, his eyes filling with tears. "Why didn't you just divorce him?" Martha gave a bitter laugh. "This was 1964, Harold. Divorce wasn't simple, especially not from a man whose father was the police chief. No one believed me. Not the police, not my parents, not even my friends. Robert told everyone I was mentally unstable. One night, after a beating that left her with broken ribs, Martha realized she would die if she stayed. While Robert was on a business trip, she packed a small bag and took the money she had secretly saved. A nurse at the hospital where I was treated gave me the name of someone who could help. A man who created new identities for women like me. It cost nearly everything I had." Martha became Margaret Wilson. She traveled west, changing buses several times to avoid being tracked. She ended up in Portland because it was far from Chicago and she had enough money for the ticket. "Those trips to Chicago weren't to visit a cousin named Elaine," Martha confessed. "I was checking that Robert wasn't looking for me anymore. My contact would update me on his life, if he had remarried, moved, or was still asking questions about my disappearance." Harold's mind raced through decades of memories, seeing them in a new light. The way Martha always tensed when police officers were nearby, how she refused to have their photo in the local newspaper, why she never wanted to adopt children, because a legal investigation might reveal her true identity. "The wooden box in the attic?" Harold asked. "My original birth certificate, letters from my contact in Chicago, a newspaper clipping about my disappearance," Martha answered. "Everything I needed to hide but couldn't bear to destroy." Harold was silent for a long time. The machines monitoring his vital signs beat steadily in the background. Outside, a light rain began to fall, tapping against the window. "Why tell me now, after all these years?" he finally asked. Martha wiped tears from her cheeks. "My last trip to Chicago in 2010 was to attend Robert's funeral. He died of a heart attack. I was finally free. She looked directly into Harold's eyes. But then I realized I wasn't free at all. I was still living a lie with the person I loved most in the world. She took both his hands in hers. I wanted to tell you then, but I was afraid. Afraid you would look at me differently. Afraid you would feel our whole marriage was built on a lie. Her voice broke. I'm still afraid, Harold. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Harold looked at Martha's tear-stained face. The woman he had loved for more than 5 decades sat beside him, finally revealed. Not Martha Williams from Seattle, but Margaret Wilson from Chicago. A woman who had fled for her life and created a new identity to survive. I need some time, Harold said quietly. This is a lot to take in. Martha nodded, wiping her eyes. I understand. I'll go get some coffee and give you space. After she left, Harold stared at the ceiling tiles, his mind racing through memories, searching for signs he had missed. The mysterious trips to Chicago, her fear of having her picture taken for the local newspaper, the locked box in the attic. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Dr. Peterson with the latest test results. The news wasn't good. The cancer was spreading faster than expected. How long? Harold asked directly. A week. Maybe less, the doctor replied softly. I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins. After the doctor left, Harold made a decision. He pressed the call button for the nurse. Could you ask my wife to bring the wooden box from our attic when she returns? He requested. She'll know what I mean. The nurse nodded and left. Harold closed his eyes, suddenly exhausted from the weight of secrets and illness. When Martha returned 2 hours later, she carried the wooden box Harold had never seen opened. It was about the size of a shoebox, made of dark oak with a small brass lock. You asked for this? Martha said uncertainly, placing it on the bedside table. Harold nodded. I want to see what you've been keeping all these years. Martha's hands shook as she removed a small key from her purse. The lock clicked open, and she lifted the lid. Inside, Harold saw yellowed papers, old photographs, and newspaper clippings carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. Martha handed him the first document. My real birth certificate. Margaret Elizabeth Wilson, born April 15, 1939, in Evanston, Illinois. Next came a faded marriage certificate to Robert James Carlson, dated June 12, 1962. Then hospital records with detailed descriptions of injuries. Multiple contusions to face and torso. Patient claims she fell downstairs. Third such incident in 8 months. Harold's hands trembled as he looked at a black and white photograph of a young woman with a split lip and darkened eye. Despite the injuries, he recognized his wife's eyes. He did this to you, Harold whispered. Martha nodded, unable to speak. Next was a newspaper clipping from the Chicago Tribune, dated October 1964. Lose a woman missing, though PLAs do expected. The article showed a photo of Martha, Margaret, smiling in a graduation cap and gown. It described how Margaret Wilson, wife of Robert Carlson, had disappeared without a trace, and how her distraught husband feared she had been kidnapped or worse. He played the grieving husband perfectly, Martha said bitterly. His father made sure the police investigation focused on finding a body, not a runaway wife. The final items were a series of letters, dated every few years, written in a careful hand. R.C. remarried in 1966, still in Chicago, safe to stay away. R.C. asked questions at your old workplace. Recommend no contact with former friends. R.C. now police captain. Still dangerous. Stay hidden. The last letter, dated 2010, was brief. R.C. died of heart attack on 9/15/10, confirmed at funeral. You are free. It was signed simply, J. Who is J? Harold asked. James Porter. He was a private investigator who specialized in helping women escape abusive situations. He created my new identity and kept track of Robert for decades. Martha's voice softened. He died in 2012, a few months after I visited Chicago for the last time. Harold carefully returned the items to the box, his heart heavy with the weight of Martha's secret life. All these years, he said quietly, you lived in fear, even with me. Martha reached for his hand. Not fear of you, Harold. Never of you. I was afraid of losing you if you knew the truth. Afraid you would think our whole marriage was a lie. Harold looked at the woman who had shared his bed, his meals, his dreams for 55 years. The woman whose real name he had only just learned. Was it a lie? He asked, his voice breaking. Martha's eyes filled with tears as she held Harold's gaze. My name was a lie. My past was hidden. But every moment with you, every feeling, every promise I made, those were all real. She squeezed his hand. I loved you from that first morning in the bakery. That has always been the truest thing about me. Harold was quiet for a long time. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the hospital room. Outside, a nurse walked past the door, her shoes squeaking softly on the polished floor. I'm trying to understand, Harold finally said. You've been two people all these years. Martha to me, Margaret somewhere deep inside. Martha nodded. At first, being Martha was like wearing someone else's clothes, uncomfortable, not quite fitting right. I had to remind myself to answer to a new name, but over time, Martha became more real than Margaret ever was. She looked down at their joined hands. The woman you fell in love with wasn't a character I was playing. She was who I became when I was finally safe. Harold thought about this as the pain medication began to make him drowsy. I need to rest now, he said, his voice thick with exhaustion. But I want you to know something. Martha leaned closer. I'm not angry, Harold whispered. I just wish you had trusted me sooner. The next morning, Harold asked the hospital staff for an unusual favor. The head nurse, touched by his request, agreed to help. By afternoon, everything was arranged. Martha arrived at the hospital room to find it transformed. Someone had placed a vase of fresh flowers on the windowsill, daisies and roses, just like the ones from their wedding day. A small portable speaker played their favorite song, the one they had danced to at their 50th anniversary. What's all this? Martha asked, confused. Harold was sitting up in bed, wearing a clean hospital gown with his hair combed neatly. He looked more alert than he had in days. I've been thinking, he said. I married Martha Williams 55 years ago. Today, I want to make a promise to Margaret Wilson. Martha's hand flew to her mouth in surprise. The nurse is bringing a chaplain in a few minutes. If that's okay with you, Harold continued. I thought we could renew our vows. No secrets this time. Tears streamed down Martha's face. You still want me? Even knowing everything. Harold reached for her hand. Margaret, Martha, whatever name you use, you're still the woman who laughed at my bad jokes for 5 decades. The woman who knew exactly how to comfort me when my mother died. The woman who sat up all night when I had pneumonia in '89. His voice grew stronger. Names change. Paperwork can be faked. But a person's heart, that's something that can't be forged. The chaplain arrived. A kind-faced woman with silver hair. 2 nurses stood as witnesses. The ceremony was simple. Harold and Martha held hands across the hospital bed as they repeated the same vows they had spoken in 1965. I, Harold Jenkins, take you. Harold paused, looking into Martha's eyes. Margaret Wilson, also known as Martha Jenkins, to be my lawfully wedded wife, today and every day we have left. Martha could barely speak through her tears. I, Margaret Wilson, take you, Harold Jenkins, to be my lawfully wedded husband, with no more secrets between us. When it was over, the small audience applauded softly. The chaplain blessed them both and left them alone. There's one more thing I need to do, Harold said after everyone had gone. Could you hand me the phone? Martha passed him the hospital room phone, curious. Harold dialed his lawyer's number. Richard, it's Harold Jenkins. I need to make some changes to my will immediately. He glanced at Martha. Yes, it's urgent. I need you to come to Portland General this afternoon. After he hung up, Martha looked at him questioningly. Your legal identity, Harold explained. If something happens to me, you could have problems with the house, the bank accounts, my pension. Everything is in Martha Jenkins' name. Martha hadn't thought of this. For decades, she had lived as Martha Jenkins so completely that she had almost forgotten the legal complications of her false identity. I'm fixing it, Harold said firmly. Everything I have will be protected, no matter what name you use. Martha leaned forward and kissed him gently. After all these years, you're still protecting me. Harold smiled weakly. Always have, always will. 3 days after renewing their vows, Harold Jenkins passed away peacefully in his sleep. Martha was holding his hand when his breathing slowed and then stopped altogether. She didn't call the nurse right away. Instead, she sat quietly, remembering their life together. The small joys, the shared sorrows, the comfortable silences of a love that had endured for more than half a century. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered, kissing his forehead one last time before pressing the call button. The funeral was held on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after Harold had discovered Martha's true identity. The small church was filled with friends, former colleagues, and neighbors who had known the couple for decades. Many spoke of Harold's kindness, his honesty, and his devotion to Martha. When it was Martha's turn to speak, she stood at the podium looking at the faces of people who knew only half her story. "Harold Jenkins was the best man I ever knew," she began, her voice surprisingly steady. "He taught me what love really means, not just through words, but through actions, every single day for 55 years. She paused, looking at the wooden casket covered with white lilies. "In our last days together, Harold showed me once again what true acceptance looks like. He reminded me that love isn't about perfect people. It's about perfectly accepting each other, flaws, secrets, and all." After the service, people gathered at the Jenkins home. They brought casseroles and cakes, shared stories about Harold, and made sure Martha wasn't alone. Bill, Harold's oldest friend, stayed the latest. He told me, Bill said as he prepared to leave, "About your past." Martha froze, her hand halfway to the door handle. "Harold called me from the hospital," Bill explained. "Asked me to look out for you. Said you might need a friend who knows the whole truth." Martha felt tears forming. Even in his final days, Harold had been thinking of her future. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's been a long time since anyone called me Margaret." "Is that what you prefer?" Bill asked gently. Martha considered the question. "No," she finally answered. "I've been Martha longer than I was ever Margaret. It's who I am now." 3 months after Harold's death, Martha received a letter from Harold's lawyer. Inside was a legal document Harold had prepared before his death, a detailed account of Martha's true identity and the circumstances that forced her to change her name. There was also a letter from Harold. "My dearest Martha," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. But I want you to know that in our final days together, you gave me a precious gift, the truth. Now I want to give you something in return, freedom from fear." Harold explained that he had arranged for the lawyer to keep his statement about her past in a sealed envelope. If Martha ever needed to reveal her true identity, for legal reasons or personal closure, the document would support her story. "You lived in the shadows for too long," Harold wrote. "I don't want you to hide anymore unless it's your choice." In the spring, Martha planted a garden in Harold's memory. As she worked the soil, she thought about identity. Martha Williams had been created out of necessity, but had become real through love and time. Margaret Wilson was a ghost from the past, but she was also the foundation of everything Martha had become. One sunny afternoon, while deadheading roses, Harold's favorites, Martha made a decision. She went inside and called Bill. "I need your help with something," she said. "I want to establish a fund at the Women's Shelter downtown, a place for women who need to start over, like I once did." "That's a wonderful idea," Bill replied. "What do you want to call it?" Martha smiled, thinking of the 2 names she had carried through her long life. "The New Beginnings Foundation," she said firmly, "because sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another." As she hung up the phone, Martha looked at the wedding photo on the mantel, she and Harold, young and full of hope. In revealing her deepest secret, she had discovered that their love was strong enough to hold the truth. Even in death, Harold had given her the greatest gift of all, the freedom to finally be her whole self.